Alright guys, welcome to your 8th UDK tutorial, and in this tutorial I'm going to be talking to you guys about the different CSG modes. These different boxes right here, what they are, how we can use them. So the very first thing I want to do for this tutorial is build a simple cube. So we already have cube selected and we already know if we click add, it adds mass. Simple enough. So now let me talk to you guys about the subtract CSG choice. So what this does is it subtracts mass when there's already mass. So let's go ahead and probably if we work with our front view, it's going to be the easiest. So go ahead and make sure you're working with your move tool, aka translation mode. Go ahead and select your red builder brush. Now go ahead and move this to the right and probably up. Just take a chunk out of this, wherever you want. Let's take a small chunk out of it, like right there. So as you can see already, we have our blue block, and that's the mask that we already added. And then this red builder brush is basically saying, alright, this is your work tool, basically. So what we're going to be doing is we want to subtract this piece from this chunk of mass right here. So we already have the red builder brush where we want it. Maybe it'll be better if I change this view right there. And go ahead and hit subtract. And as you can see, it subtracts mass from where you already have mass. So basically, the CSG add adds a chunk of mass to your game, and the CSG subtracts a chunk of mass to your game. Simple enough. So now let me go ahead and, with that being said, go ahead and select both of these, and we'll delete that. And now let me go ahead and move this out of the way, and we'll go ahead and delete this subtraction. And actually, I'm kind of jumping ahead of myself. Just go ahead and hit File, New, Don't Save, because I want to teach you guys something first. What I want to teach you guys now is what the intersect and de-intersect tool mean. I almost forgot that. So go ahead and might as well add a chunk of mass right here. So now we have a chunk of mass, just a square on our screen. Now let's go ahead and jump to front view again, and I'm going to move this red builder brush. Let's go ahead and move it right where it was before, up and over until it's taken out a nice little section right there. So let me change this view right here. So now we have a chunk of mass right here, and the red builder brush is intersecting a section of it. Now what these two buttons down here mean, intersect and de-intersect, it's basically a way of quickly changing the shape and size of your red builder brush without having to change every single point. So anytime you hit this intersect button, look what happens. It takes where it's overlaying a chunk of mass and it changes the red builder brush to intersect that perfectly. So as you can see, instead of having to resize this brush right here, what we did is we hit this intersect button and it pretty much changed the brush size to intersect that. Maybe you can see a little better right there. So check it out. Pretty cool, huh? So I'm going to go ahead and hit this button, undo. So just to get, my red builder brush back to normal. And now let me go ahead and hit this button right here. Now what the CSG de-intersect means is basically the exact opposite. Wherever there's mass already or wherever it's overlapping something, let me go ahead and click it and I can talk about it later on. So you can probably see in this perspective view and this front view the best. Instead of only creating the red builder brush where it is overlaying something, instead that's the only space it takes away from the red builder brush. So now our red builder brush is an entirely new shape depending on what we were overlapping. So just remember, CSG add adds mass to the screen, CSG subtract subtracts mass from the screen, intersect changes the brush size to whatever it's intersecting. It only changes the red builder brush to that size, and CSG de-intersects takes a chunk out of the red builder brush depending on what it was overlaying. So with that being said, let me say this. Let me go ahead and get a new file once again, and I want to cover one last thing before I let you guys go in this tutorial. Go ahead and let's say we want to add a shape right there, and then we want to go ahead and we decide that we want to make a subtract brush. So go ahead and we want to take a chunk out of this and go ahead and hit this to subtract it, and as we can see, nothing new, nothing unexpected. It takes a chunk out of this. So let's go ahead and get rid of our red builder brush, and as we can see in this front view, we got our main brush right here, which is of course the main add brush, it adds mask to the screen. And then we have this subtract brush, which basically subtracted mask, takes a chunk out of it. So let's say we want to change this, and maybe we didn't want to take a chunk out quite as big. So what we can do is we can move this subtract over here, and we'll move it up a little bit so the chunk isn't quite as big. But look what's going on right here. That's kind of weird. I mean, it changed in this view, but whenever we changed it in this view, it didn't update it. That's kind of weird, since our red builder brush, our add brush was right there, and our subtract brush is still there, yet the geometry is not updating. Anytime you come across this issue where your geometry is not updating, this is because of this. The UDK doesn't rebuild your geometry every time you move a brush. If it was going to do that, it would eat all your computer's memory and resources. So anytime you want to explicitly update or refresh your geometry, you need to go to this button up here, Build Geometry for Visible Levels. Now I'm going to go ahead and click this, and look what happens in my perspective view down here. Go ahead and click it, and it basically updates it. So this basically means build geometry for visible levels. It's basically another way of saying, alright UDK, update or refresh my geometry. So again, anytime you move your shape like this, it's not going to change in the perspective view because it's not rebuilding your geometry. In order to explicitly rebuild your geometry, you need to go click this button right here, Build Geometry for Visible Levels, and then it updates all your geometry. So if you have a problem where you're like, alright, I moved this, but that's not, updating, that's what's going on. So that's all I want to talk to you guys about in this tutorial. Again, don't forget what all of these CSG modes do, and also when you're coming across the issue of you try to rebuild your geometry and it doesn't look exactly like you expected, that's what's going on. UDK doesn't rebuild your geometry each time. You have to explicitly tell it to rebuild. So that being said, thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.